Having completed Sonic the Hedgehog on an emulator a few hours earlier, I was in a nostalgic mood. After searching YouTube for old Sega Genesis commercials, my fingers still lingered on the mouse. I kept clicking on the suggested videos and reliving old memories from my childhood. I felt a comfort one only gets from seeing things you never really knew had such an influence on you when you were young and innocent. Soon I was lost reveling in such classics as Melts in Your Mouth, Not in Your Hand, Who Loves Oranges, Oda, Nitrogen Monoxide Soup for You, How You Doing? Come with me if you want to. Live, the truth is out there, and of course, was also up. I only realized that I'd lost track of time when I tried to find my phone in what was now pitch dark room. Checking the time on my monitor, I was shocked to find it was already after 2 a.m. I resolved to go to bed as I had class in the morning, but couldn't resist watching one last video just to round off the night. Scanning through the suggestions, I was disappointed to find that I had watched them all except for this one video at the very bottom, entitled Bill Cosby Sells His Soul for Pudding. Although I had a vague idea of who Bill Cosby was from old Simpsons episodes, I'd never actually seen anything he was famous for. But lines admit the title intrigued me somewhat. As I clicked the link and sat back to be entertained, I had no idea that I was making the biggest mistake of my life. The video started off innocently enough, obviously some old commercial for gelatine. Bill Cosby was standing in a kitchen surrounded by little kids. There's an easy way to make Jell-O instant pudding. Just shake it, he announced in a cheery voice. The video skipped a bit at this point, lingering on the shake it part. A tad annoying, but the internet in the house could become a little jittery at times, so I was used to it. The video cut to Cosby's head moving in from the left of the screen. Follow the directions, he said. I wasn't sure why at the time, but something about this was vaguely unsettling. Though I thought perhaps it was due to the fact that it was a sudden jump cut. A mangled version of the product jingle played. Then it cut back to follow the directions, only slower. My brow furrowed. The next part was from a different advert. Cosby was holding for jiggling watermelons. The movement seemed to be semi-cyclical, moving from the start to the end and back again. It was icy and quite nauseating, which made it all the more abrupt when then audio cut to triple speed. What's making these watermelons wriggle? I felt at this point extremely uncomfortable, like my defenses were being broken down. I felt just like Jell-O gelatin. Cosby finished the thought for me several times. This was beginning to feel really weird. The scene cut to a ginger kid repeating the same movement over and over. That's it, I thought. Enough of this. Ginger kids freaked me out at the best of times. As I raised my hand to Ovi the mouse, however, something peculiar happened. A cut to Cosby again, moving his left hand in seemingly random directions, putting pop in his right, repeating this a number of times. My right hand immediately became stiff and started to spasm beyond my control, disrupting my path to the mouse. After that point on, I was powerless to control myself, forced to sit and witness what was unfolding. Beth or me, regardless of will. At this point of no return, Cosby lingered a look of surprise my way, almost mockingly, emitting a demonically low-pitched moan. I was scared Another kid in the Vitae. Oh, seemed to echo my emotions. Hey, Bill Cosby, what's T-H-A, If I could have screamed at that point, I would have. Follow the directions, Cosby repeated horrifyingly. The man, lead jingle played again, for longer this time, each second forcibly. Propping up my eyelids, the watermelon part reappeared, even slower than before, but instead of being nauseated, I felt lulled into subservience. The scene cut to a smiley-faced clock, moving its hands in an almost wave-like pattern, a bit. Crunch warning repeated, almost too quick for me to make out. You sing, you die. You sing, you die, before crunching completely to a jarring buzz, its eyes popping open and shut at a speed greater than what should be physically possible. Follow the directions, follow the directions. The video grinded to a complete halt. Cosby's judgmental eyes fixed squarely on mine, just long enough to make me feel a glimmer of hope that the internet had failed before he whipped his head back, saying, "Don't worry," with a smug superiority. Pudding pop swirl the demon Cosby finished before letting his head fly about erratically on his unmoving shoulders in a movement akin to something out of The Exorcist. What with that what it continued, as if to eradicate any morsel of critical thinking left in my being. The demon proceeded to fellate a chocolate pudding pop with a sleazy and holy glee. A close-up cut to its burningly erotic gaze left me with no semblance of the lie that I had not been violated. Even though the video quality was grainy, those eyes pierced me to my very soul. They were so hyper-realistic. Thank you, it finished, before poising itself like a cat ready to pounce. In the brief respite that followed, I allowed myself to exhale for the first time since that horror began. As the breath exuded, however, I felt my consciousness follow suit, all remnants of perception fading as I slipped into an abyss, serenaded by the haunting echo of Wattier Melmans, marking my descent into darkness until I knew no more. I came to by the sound of the front door closing downstairs. It was still dark outside. Man, I must have been conked out for at least an hour, I thought to myself as I rubbed the back of my creaky neck on the way down to the kitchen. I felt exhausted as I pushed open the door, but I needed both water and to find out who could be calling at this hour. Turns out it was just my housemate getting home from a nightclub. "Hey man," I greeted him, "didn't know you went out. Don't you have an exam in the morning? What is it like for a.m.? What are you talking about, dude?" he asked quizzically. "It's only 12:30. And that exam was this morning. You hire something?" At this point I felt extremely muddled. Nah man, that can't be right. I fell asleep like 2 hours ago. We just finished playing Sonic earlier on, remember? Dude, that was yesterday. I ain't seen you at all today. Whatever you're on, you gotta share it with me. He chuckled. My face knotted into a ball of confusion. I simply turned to go check my calendar upstairs. He couldn't have been right. PFFFT fine, he snorted. And, by the way, you owe me a box of pudding pops, he called after me. I froze. What did you say, my pudding pops? I had a whole box this morning. NG, now they're gone. With that I felt a tremendous fear and bolted up the stairs. Hey man, don't worry about it, I ain't mad. Just get some new ones when you can, that's all, he shouted. I could barely hear him though as I raced to my room to check my computer. I thought it was just in power save mode, and I woke up, but now it wouldn't even turn on. The screen was on standby, but the actual computer was unresponsive. After much frenzied inspection, I found that the power cord had been cut. To say I was freaked out would have been a massive understatement. What in the name of holy hell is going on? I remember muttering to myself. It's been a whole week since then, and things have just been getting stranger and stranger. The blackouts are becoming longer and more frequent, and I can feel myself slipping away. Every time I've slept, I've been plagued by visions of the beast, pudding and ginger kids everywhere. I tried my best to fight it. I've been awake now for 48 hours, but it's no use. I can feel Bill Cosby's presence even in my waking moments. Sometimes I don't know where I am and can't communicate in anything other than nonsensical jabbering. 2 days ago I suddenly snapped, head back to reality to find myself staring at my fridge, full to the brim with pudding pops. I screamed and tried to run, but immediately fell to the floor as I was wearing 2 halves of watermelon on them. Why feet instead of shoes? I'm really scared. There's no one in the house anymore. All my housemates have disappeared. I can't even bear to think what may have happened to them, what I in my delirium may have done, the atrocities that monster may have used these hands for. I'm doomed. There's no hope for me. I realize that now. The reason I write this is to share my story so that whatever happens, at least I got chance to tell my side of it, and maybe spare other potential victims the horror of this terrible fate. To those who loved me, my family, my friends, try to remember me as I once was. To everyone else, for all that is holy, whatever you do, do not watch the video. Oh God, flip FLOP it's happening again. I can flim-flam feel it. God, please, zamzabity I can't hiffabitty hold out much longer. He's kimkankibatikum. Zemsami body help me. Zemzem zabai zilp me. Zelp mimbam bobbity flip flum flobbity. Zipsamopity boop ... follow. The directions. Story 2. They never could remember the girl's bathroom is haunted. That sentence was the sentence that tortured him. Not because it was true, but because every goddamn day of his L.E.F.A., that exact same string of words were thrown in his face at a high velocity. I shrieking, sobbing, ecstatic in anything but serious childish fear, hyperventilating, off-the-wall first graders, starting rig, HT after the announcements every morning at 9 o'clock sharp. This was his life. Originally, he had liked his job, adored it actually. He loved working with the kids, no matter how annoying they got and what decibel their piercing voices could reach on a daily basis. Eventually, though, his joy for his chosen profession began to dwindle until it reduced to an all-time disdain. He constantly pondered alternative career options, going back to school, starting his own business, anything to escape this. But her knew he never would. As much as he secretly resented them, he did love his young students, and, besides, it's not like he had the money from an elementary teacher's salary to survive for 2 minutes without a consistently paying job. He had no kids of his own, an extraordinarily average, middle-class white man. His only noticeable differences in appearance were that he was unusually tall and thin, but remarkably young-looking for his age, which was 43. Personality-wise, he was also astoundingly and out of the ordinary. He hated his job. He despised most of his fellow humans, specifically his co-workers. He had reached the point in his life where the trivial things that mattered so much when he was younger meant little to him. The only thing he cared about was money and getting through the week without losing his sanity in front of the hordes of children who he loved that plagued his every waking moment. The only thing remarkable about this man was the way he died. Like everything else about him, the day of his death was exceedingly normal. He woke up at 7, drove the car he had in his possession for almost 6 years by that time to the center of town, turned on the radio to the same station as always, discovered tea. At his favorite drive-through coffee shop was closed. He then proceeded to turn the car round and head for the gas station, tell himself that although the coffee there may be disgusting and hint vague, Healy that it had been in existence since the 80s. A speeding convertible cut him off at the intersection. He swore profusely, although he didn't necessarily care that much, arrived at the gas station, bought said horrific coffee for 99 cents plus tax, and was on his way to the elementary school in the next town over. Once there, he was bombarded with small children asking hundreds of questions an hour, complaining about the behavior of the other kids, cries for help after getting hurt despite their teachers' attempts to watch their every move, and, of course, the pleas for him to make sure that the girls' bathroom was safe to enter, as it surely contained a ghost or monster or demon or mass murderer, and so on and so forth. Typical childhood tomfoolery. It took him the standard 15 minutes before school officially started to calm everyone down, and he thus began the day's lesson. Everything went swimmingly until recess. The kids impatiently hopped in a single file line, infuriated at their teacher's leisurely strolling pace, until they scattered once they hit the playground. A group of girls asked to go to the bathroom. Our main character granted them his permission, and then sat at the base of the stairs leading down from the main entrance to supervise the energetic cluster of children. He had learned at an early point in his vocation that no amount or quality of surveillance of overactive elementary schoolers could prevent catastrophe of any sort. He wound up walking a teary-eyed 5-year-old, a kindergartner, not even from his class, to the nurse's office, and it was then did he witness the group of 3 girls from his class, who had previously excused themselves to the bathroom, sprint down the hall. They begged him to check the bathroom. He refused, insisting that, first of all, he wasn't allowed in the girls' bathroom, and second, there was nothing to be afraid of. It was just their imagination. They weren't buying it. The girls followed him out the door back to the playground, while they relentlessly repeated their pleading, until he finally asked Mrs. Cat Cosin, a woman about his age, but with far more energy than he, to investigate. The 2 believed, obviously, like any good adult grown out of the land of fantasies, that there would, in fact, be absolutely nothing in the bathroom. So off she went. At first she played along with the girls, pretending that they were going to go battle some fearsome monster, lifting the spirits of the girls as best she could, and all was well until all sprinted out of the bathroom in a panic. The kids were ushered back into their respective classrooms, while our main character and Mrs. Cat Cosin discussed the events just seen. He disbelieved it. She disbelieved it. Must have been the new medication her doctor had put her on. Must have been how tired she was. Must have been. All the kids had been dismissed. The majority of teachers had left. Those who were still in school were the custodians, those who worked in the main office, and the teachers and students involved in after-school activities. Our main character was one of the sort. He Girl Scouts has asked to use his room, and he had given them his permission, but it was mandatory that he remain in the room for the duration of the meeting. He sat there and did papers on autopilot, as usual, until he noticed something peculiar. The troop leader, a woman of about 30 years, asked a little girl to check on another named Emily, who'd gone off to the bathroom and never came back. The girl stalked off, bothered to be pried away from her friends. She was gone for nearly 5 minutes before the woman became nervous again. She was about to head to girl's bathroom to find them when the first one, her name was Garen, went running by the door before passing out halfway down the hallway. The woman sternly instructed the girls to stay in the classroom while she went to help Karen, who was now bleeding from the fall. Our main character, shocked as could be, waited for the woman and the girl to get back into the class before leaving them and going to see what was the matter. While he was away, the girls inside the classroom had resumed a calm state, or as calm as a group of children could be. Down the hall and to the left was the girls' bathroom, where high-pitched shrieking could be heard at a continuous rate. In terror, memories are easily forgotten, but quick to reappear when needed the least. Before he could enter, his mind suddenly flashed to the images he had imagined while listening to Mrs. Cat Cosin earlier. He paused at the entrance. You'd think, and he certainly always thought, that in moments that required bravery, he would come through, and this expectation really was the only thing that forced him into the girls' bathroom in the heroic act of attempting to save a child from God knows what. What a hero! How amazing! He took 2 steps and then fainted. Emily, Karen, the woman, the other girls, and all those left in the building were distant, practically non-existent to him. He woke up slowly, and contrary to his better judgment, he did not feel afraid. As his consciousness grew, so did fear, until it became something inexplicable, something absolutely indescribable, nothing he could have ever dreamt. And there was nothing there, nothing at all. And it suddenly hit him how brave those children must have been to stand within this. He didn't scream, but only because he was far too afraid was not the word. Don't make any noise. And it suddenly hit him. Another thing, how much courage it took to scream. You have to get up. You have to get up. You have to get out of here. You have to leave. This is what he told himself. Calm was not the word. Something beyond fear, something beyond calm. Something completely different, something he could never have dreamed of. He stood. He looked at the ground, at where he had been laying. He saw the smattering of blood from where he had fallen, just like the kid, and he suddenly felt embarrassed. Something beyond fear and something beyond calm allowed for emotions to be played over others. Don't look in the mirror. It was only rational. Don't look in the mirror. Of course, why would I? I'm sitting in the middle of a quite possibly haunted as hell. Where was he? He was in the girls' bathroom. Why was in the girls' bathroom? Why did he stay after school in the first place? Why can't he look in the mirror again? Lazily, he lifted his head to face the full-length mirror across from him. Where did the kids go? Why were they scared? Why did he fall? Why was his head cut and bleeding? Who was the girl on the ceiling? The kids left the building sobbing. The Girl Scout leader had to go to therapy. For the next 10 years, the school was shut down. The teachers and school workers were laid off, quit, paid for their mental trauma, and found jobs elsewhere. Most had post-traumatic stress. Most had depression. Most woke up screaming in the middle of tea night. But the strange thing was, they never could figure out why. They never could remember. Our main character's name was Adam Lennox. He was confirmed dead 7 years after. He went missing, and no one could figure out where he went or what had happened to him. Not the police, not the forensic scientists, not even the witnesses. They never could remember, and they never could remember who was the girl on the ceiling. Story 3. Logical explanations. I awoke that night to echo my dog barking up a storm. He was perched on the edge of my bed, facing the door and yapping away like crazy. I scratched him behind the ear to get him to calm down and guided him to his usual spot on my bed. In hindsight, him barking was the first warning. My brain, overactive as it is, was curious as to why he was behaving so oddly. Echo rarely barked at anything, so it was unlikely he was barking at nothing. Perhaps there is a skunk in the yard, I thought to myself, seeing as how I was half asleep at the time. That explanation seemed perfectly logical. Had I been more aware, I would have realized that any skunks in the neighborhood would be weeks into their hibernation this time of year. Even if they weren't, the vicious snowstorm outside would deter them from wandering about. I attempted to fall asleep after that, and how I wish that I did. Unfortunately, due to my habit of sleeping with my mouth open, I was becoming increasingly aware of how thirsty I was. I tried to stay in the warmth of my bed for as long as possible, but it wasn't long before my tongue felt like sandpaper. It was clear to me that I wouldn't be able to sleep without a glass of water. I told Echo to stay and slipped into my moccasins. The air outside my nest of blankets was freezing, so I put on my housecoat as well. When I left my bedroom, I noticed that the basement television was showing static. Mother probably forgot to turn it off after Washington ching her murder mysteries, I thought. The TV's playing static because of the storm outside. It's just messing with our cable. Another logical explanation, which would be far less logical if I were fully awake. My mother, no matter how tired she was, would never leave the television on. She's far too meticulous to do something like that. In my sleepy brain, however, it made perfect sense. I couldn't find the TV remote, as the room was dark, and I didn't want to accidentally blind myself by turning on the lights, so I left the TV on. I should. That turned back, crawled back into bed, and waited for morning. I climbed the stairs to the landing, which was bathed in an orange glow, cast by the street lights reflecting off of the clouds above. From up here, I could hear the wind battering itself against the house's walls. I was starting to wake up a little bit. I noticed that the deadbolt on the door was unlocked. That was my final warning. My parents felt that it wasn't necessary, what with the storm, and all the seeds of doubt began to form in my mind. I knew that that wasn't the case. Some new neighbors have been suspected of breaking into people's houses and stealing their liquor. My parents, being collectors of fine wines, have made it a habit to lock the deadbolt every night for the past few months. Even when the act was completely pointless, my conscious brain was starting to wake up, starting to notice these things. A feeling of uneasiness began to pool in my gut. Still, after locking the deadbolt, I continued to the kitchen. From the kitchen, I had a clear view of the living room, and while I filled an empty glass with water from the sink, I not only noticed that the television up here was also showing static, but that there was a figure seated on the couch. "Don't worry," I thought nervously. "That's just Dad. He's been sleepwalking again." This time I was fully aware of the flaws in this logic. Explanation: the fact that the figure on the couch was bald and plump, while my father is lean and his hair is only beginning to thin. The fact that my father has been taking medications to prevent his sleepwalking. The fact that I could hear him snoring from my parents' bedroom. I tried to disregard these thoughts, to push them to the back of my mind like I had done before. This time it didn't work. I gently set my glass on the kitchen counter. My hands were cold and clammy, shaking in terror. My heart rate was increasing and my breathing was rapid. Even in the confusion of the moment, I knew that this wasn't just some regular burglar. I doubted that the thing on the couch was even human. I reached for the phone to call 911, only to find out that I couldn't get any service due to the storm. Frustrated and confused, I started randomly pushing buttons on the keypad. That's when I heard the thing move. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to make my blood run cold and send clammy sweat down my back. It was the sound of bones popping, not just a few either. It sounded like an entire room full of people cracking their necks, backs, and knuckles all at once. I turned from the useless phone to look at the creature for the first time. It was now standing, facing me and illuminated by the orange glow from the living room's window. It stood at about 6 feet tall, was completely naked and was rather plump. Its skin was a sallow grayish color and looked almost slimy. The creature's arms dangled as if they were boneless, and at the end of each was a gnarled mass of fingers. The worst part about the creature, however, was its face. The thing had no nose, only 2 slits where its nostrils would be. Its eyes were hollow, white orbs that seemed too large for the rest of its face. As for its mouth, well, it didn't really have one. It looked as if its entire lower jaw had been knocked clean off the rest of its fat, leaving a swollen, pink tongue hanging against its neck. The creature started walking towards me, making that awful sound with each step. It looked like it was trying to speak to me, but without its the tongue could only wriggle around helplessly as sinister moans escaped its throat. I did what anybody else would do in that situation. I ran like hell. When I got to the landing, I closed the door between the landing and the first floor. I had 3 options. I could surrender myself to the creature. I could run downstairs, which would eventually lead to a dead end, or I could run outside and face one of the worst blizzards of the decade. None of my choices were desirable, but I knew that I'd be dead anyway if I kept standing there. I didn't get much time to choose, though, as the door between me and the creature swung open, revealing that thing in all its grotesque glory. It began to descend the stairs toward me. I made my decision, and as stupid as it was, I wouldn't be alive if I hadn't done it. I unlocked the deadbolt and ran outside. For the first few seconds, I felt absolutely nothing save for the adrenaline and fear surging through me. Looking back at the house as I ran, I swear I could see the creature looking at me through the kitchen window. It looked almost happy. By the time my house faded into the blizzard, the cold was starting to set in. Wearing only pajamas, slippers, and a house coat, it wasn't hard to see why. I continued running, in fear that the thing would chase me, but I was starting to go numb by each time I reached the highway. I couldn't feel my fingers. By the time I noticed the approaching headlights, I couldn't feel my toes. By the time the vehicle had stopped in front of me, everything was starting to go black. I awoke several hours later to the sound of a machine beeping. At first, I thought the whole thing was a nightmare, that I was back in my bed, and that my alarm clock was telling me to wake up and go to school. I began to regain consciousness and realize that I was no longer wearing my pajamas. Rather, I was wearing a hospital gown. There was a nurse standing above me, scanning my vitals. Apparently, a tow truck driver had found me on his way to a job. He did what anyone else would do if they found a teenager running like hell in the middle of a snowstorm at me. Night and rushed me to the nearby hospital. I was admitted to with severe frostbite and a moderate case of hypothermia. My parents were contacted immediately, and at first it seemed I was going to go back home again, that is, until the doctors asked why I was outside in my pajamas in the first place. I told them the story as I couldn't think of any excuse that sounded less crazy. As one might expect, I was shipped off to the psyche ward. That is where I'm typing this now. See, the doctors can come up with any number of logical explanations. They can tell me that I was hallucinating, that I was having a nightmare, that I was overstressed. With a medical degree, one can explain any unnatural phenomena with enough pills and prescriptions, but just because an explanation is logical doesn't mean that it's true. At first I believed what they were saying. At first it all made sense. But something that happened later in the day changed that. I was reading a book in my bed, starting to come to terms with what happened when the TV in my room flickered to life. It was showing static. Outside the window, I could a gray figure outside the hospital. Even though I was on the 4th floor, I could tell that it was looking directly at me. This story is a creepypasta success story. It got such a positive reception over at Creepypasta that it's being moved here to the main site. Congratulations to the author and thanks to the Creepypasta community for the save story for Nightmare. I had that dream again. I woke up in the middle of an empty street. The city around me, unrecognizable and dead. Skyscrapers stood rotting and falling apart. Cars parked near shattered walkways lay rusted. A Sing building stood taller than all the rest. Its frame, untouched by time, stood tall and looming. It was just a regular building, yet I feared it with every fiber of my being. I looked upon it and thought, everything that is horrid and ugly in this existence lies within this building. I don't know why I knew this. Against my will, I found myself walking toward the building. As I moved closer and closer, I began to see the front of the entrance of the structure. There hung a sign above the entryway. It glared a foreboding neon red and simply read hospital. It was like a child's drawing, a child doesn't know that certain places have specific names. They just label police stations as police station and stores as store. When I saw this sign, I laughed, sobbed. All I could think was, hospitals have two sides to them. On one side you have the smiling 2-year-old walking proudly out of doctor's office with a Band-Aid on his shoulder and a lollipop in his hand. Then you have the other side, where the 2-year-old doesn't get the lollipop. Instead, he gets the news that he won't live long enough to ever get another piece of candy again. And I laughed, cried, because this hospital only had that one side. This is no place of healing. It's a damn pit stop before you're on your way to the pearly gates and the sky, the fires of hell. There were no smiling faces in this hospital, no excited children telling mothers or fathers about how brave they were when they got their seasonal shots, no wives telling anxious husbands that a little bundle of joy was on the way. There were only mothers and fathers crying and sobbing as the doctor placed the white sheet over their child's face. Only crying wives sobbing to their husbands because they had miscarried for the 3rd time. Hell, even the doctor that worked here wouldn't be the kind. We later found out that your insurance won't cover this, so could you please let us pull the plug? You're costing this hospital money. Of course, all of this was just my imagination. There are no people in that hospital, be they doctor or patient. No one could survive in that godforsaken place. My feet started moving again. As horrified to find that I was moving closer and closer to the door. Oh God, please no. Cut off my limbs. Gouge out my eyes. Anything, but don't force me into this place. I screamed and raved in my head, but my legs would not obey me. I placed my hands on the handle and opened the door. Immediately a foul stench filled my nostrils. It smelled like daisies and rotting flesh, the smell of someone trying to hide filth and taint under a blanket of cheap air freshener. I gagged, and the inside of my stomach lurched. I managed to gain control of my legs and turned to leave. As fast as I could, I stared in horror. The door was no longer there. I screamed, then stopped. A voice filtered into my head. Hello, what's your name? Are you here to visit me? I'm so lonely. The voice was childlike, and if you didn't pay attention to it, then it would almost seem pleasant. But I focused. My fear forced me to. And I heard the voice bay, and the voice, it sounded horrifying, like the screams of 1,000 agonized and tortured souls all condensed into one sound. It was the sound of insanity. The voice spoke again. Hello, are you going to visit me? I'm not far. Just take the elevator to the 13th floor. I'm the only one there. I hated this child's things. Voice, it drove rusted nails into my ears and shard of glass straight into my mind. This child monster is the reason this hospital grave felt so dead, so disgusting. But I lost control of my body once again. I moved to the elevators. The doors instantly opened. I stepped inside. The doors closed, and for a moment my heart stopped. I looked to the elevator's control panel. There was only one button, a floor button. The 13th floor. Ironic, isn't it? So many elevators skip the 13th floor, but this one only went to the 13th. My hand extended, and my finger pushed the button. The elevator lurched, and I could hear the wires above strain to carry their load. I read the wires would snap, and I would fall to my death, though in the back of my head I almost wished I would just fall so I wouldn't have to face the patient of floor 13. The elevator move. Ed slowly, and I felt eternity pass me by before it halted to a stop with a recognizable ding a death toll. The doors slid open, and I stepped into the hallway. The air was cold here, and it seemed that no one tried to hide the scent of decay here. The lights were dim, and the paint on the walls was peeling. A cockroach scuttled into a hole in the wall only for a rat to follow a second lot. But the walls were bare, and I could see no rooms. I turned to my left and began to walk down the hall. I came to a stop in front of the only door on this floor. I stared at the door. The plaque on it read 1303. Below the plaque, a poem warning was engraved onto the wood of the door, scratched out by a dying soul. Here lies the bad thing. Among the monsters, he is king. Murderers, rapists, psychopaths his kin. Stare not at the endless rows of teeth in his grin. Walk away if you can. Run away. Open not this door. Let not the voice of the bad thing make you sway. I wish I could follow that piece of advice. I felt my hand move. Why does my body keep betraying me? I thrust out my other hand, still under my control, and clutched at the traitorous limb. The child bad thing spoke. He again. Why are you taking so long, sir? Hurry the fuck up. I am so lonely. Open the goddamn door. Please come inside, you piece of shit. I'll kill you. I'll rip you apart. I could hear the other voice clearly now, Insanity's voice. It screamed and threatened me. It lashed like an animal on short chain. It wanted out. I was afraid. I was more afraid than I have ever been. In my life, sweat trickled down my neck where veins bulged with fear-induced adrenaline, my arms shaking, my right fighting against my left to keep me from opening the door seal. My right hand was cramping. It was getting harder and harder to keep a hold of my left hand. Traitor. Sir, are you still there, you son of a bitch? You better still fucking be there. Please open the door. It's been so long since anyone visited. Fucking piece of shit. Open the door. The clashing of that childlike voice, with the voice of 1,000 screams, was nauseating. Tears welled up in my eyes and fell down white cheeks. I couldn't stand it anymore. I screamed and let go of my hand that strained to grab the doorknob. My left hand instantly shot out of my grip and took a hold of the knob. My eyes watched on in horror as my hand slowly turned the doorknob. I heard the click of the door, the loudest sound I had ever heard. Slowly, I pushed the door inward and stood before the bed in the center of the room. In the bed light, a sickly little boy, tubes in his mouth and IVs in his arms. A heart monitor stood beside the bed. It beeped at a slow tempo. Does this monster even have a heart? I looked at the child, and for all appearances' sake, he looked normal, but I knew, as I looked at him, I knew that what was in that bed was not a child. It wasn't even human. The child monster thing opened its eyes, and I nearly collapsed to my knees. There were no eyes, just two pieces of a broken mirror shoved into bloody sockets. I saw my reflection in those eyes, but not a reflectio. And of how I currently was, I saw a reflection of myself, blooded and battered, my eyes gone and my chest torn open to reveal my still beating heart. Hello, sir. I am so glad you came to visit. Now I can eat you. The childlike voice was gone. The monster ripped the tubes from its mouth to reveal not teeth, ta-ra after row of syringe needles dripping with fluid venom. I screamed, but I could not move. The beast lunged from the bed and tackled me to the floor, and as my head hit the tile, all I could think was, "You look an awful lot like my son, kid." I woke up. I got out of bed, body drenched in a cold sweat. My lungs were out of breath. I walked out of my room and into the hallway. I walked until I reached my son's room and opened the door. I stepped inside and walked to my son's bed. I leaned down, caught with a sudden urge to kiss my son's head and reassure myself that he is fine. I smiled at him, all of my fear vanishing, replaced by the unconditional love I had for my son. I turned to leave, never noticing my son's smile, revealing needle teeth and opening his mirror eyes. The end. Story 5. The white ones they wore. White, actually, they were white. White skin, white hair, white eyes. Nothing about their appearance had color. They looked like an empty outline in a coloring book. I started noticing their presence as, slowly, over time, I remember the first time I saw one. I was driving home from school, and the ground was freshly covered in a blanket of snow. I was rounding a corner when I glanced up at my rearview mirror. I saw it walking, almost prancing, in slow motion past my car. I damn near ran off the road. Luckily, there were no other cars around, so I composed myself and kept driving. I had convinced myself that I was seeing things and went on with my day like normal. It was 3 days before I saw another one. Let me be clear, I still don't know what they are or why they're here. I don't even know what to call them, so I will just refer to them as white ones from here on out. As I was saying, it was 3 days before I saw another. I was sitting in my bedroom doing homework and listening to music when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I glanced up. Everything looked normal. Still, something felt off. So I got up and walked over to my window. Standing in my yard, barely distinguishable against the snow, was a white woman. She stood in a white gown that fluttered in the breeze. Every single part of her, every indent, T, and crevice was completely white. She stared blankly up at me. My heart immediately started to race, and I lunged for my phone, prepared to dial the police. When I turned back, however, she was gone. I slept with the light on that night, and every night since. I told my mother about it, but she wouldn't have it. She insisted that it was all in my head. Again, I somehow managed to convince myself that it was my imagination and fell back into my usual routine. Everything was normal for about a week. The following weekend, my parents decided to take a day trip out of town, leaving me home by myself. I just watched TV, ate a lot of junk food, and took a nap. At about 3 in the afternoon, I decided to go get the mail. I put on my jacket and boots and stepped outside, where the freezing air instantly rushed over me, sending shivers down my spine. As I made my way to the mailbox, I noticed that it was oddly silent. No breeze, no traffic, no birds, no nothing. I walked slowly back up my driveway, mail in hand, listening for any source of noise. That's when I saw it. The same figure that I spotted outside my window a week ago was standing not 6 feet from me. I froze. She stared at me with her white eyes, standing completely still. It felt like a millennium before I stopped holding my breath. Finally, I opened my mouth. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice shaking. She did nothing. Remaining as still as a statue, I repeated myself, louder this time. "Who are you, and what do you want?" She stood so motionless that I started to wonder if she was even real. I slowly reached out my hand to touch her arm when her hand latched around my wrist. Her grip was impossibly strong, and I felt my bones cracking. Her eyes appeared apologetic. I opened my mouth to beg her to let go, but before I could say anything, a gentle breeze brushed by. White flakes started to break away from her until she completely disintegrated into dust that was quickly carried away by the wind. I felt sick to my stomach, and sure of what I'd just witnessed. I bolted back inside, clutching the mail and my wrist to my chest. Inside, I locked every window and door and turned on every light. It wasn't until a minute or so later that I realized that I was trembling. My wrists throbbed in pain, so I wrapped it in an ice pack. When my parents returned home a few hours later, I didn't say anything. They wouldn't have believed me. To be honest, I wouldn't blame them. It feels crazy just writing it out. I spent the next few days very cautiously. I laid low and spent most of my time at home, and I tried to avoid being completely alone. I wore long-sleeve shirts to conceal the bruises on my arm. They began to fade, and I slowly unwound, getting more sleep and growing less tense until I completely let my guard down. About 2 weeks after the last sighting was the next one. Nah, this is where it gets weird. It was a Saturday morning, and I was walking out to my car when I felt a cool draft on the back of my neck. Since it's the winter, this normally wouldn't be odd, but the air around me was completely still. I turned around to find myself face to face with a white one. When I say face to face, I mean actually face to face. It was practically standing on my toes. I let out a scream and stumbled backwards, but it reached out and grabbed my wrist just like the other one. Its hand clamped around my wrist, and a sharp pain started shooting through me. It was right then that I saw my hand begin to turn blue. My peripheral vision grew fuzzy, and I could feel myself falling. The last thing I remember before I blacked out was the sound of a loud bang. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I woke up on a strange couch in a house that I didn't recognize. There were animal heads mounted on plaques covering the walls. They were all different sizes, scattered around the room: deer, raccoon, squirrels, even a fox. The walls had an artificial wood appearance, like the inside of a log cabin. I sat up, my heart beginning to race. "Oh, good, you're awake." I looked up to see a large man in a plaid shirt and suspenders enter the room. He held 2 mugs and set one down on the table in front of me. He was a burly man with a beard and receding hairline. He looked familiar. "Where am I?" "You're in my living room." "Who are you?" He chuckled. "Samuel Robbins. You live down the street from me." Something clicked inside my head. I had remembered going to his door out trick-or-treating as a kid. He always gave people a full-size candy bar and a bag of trail mix to even out the unhealthiness. He was a nice guy. Oh, yeah? I said, my head spinning slightly. Why am I here? He frowned. You don't remember what happened, do you? I shook my head, and he gestured at my wrist. I looked down to see deep bruises in the shape of fingers, and I felt my stomach drop. What was that thing? I whispered. I don't know. But I caught you just in time. What happened? I heard you scream, so I ran outside with my shotgun. That thing was gripping you tight, and from a distance I could see your hand turning blue. The bang, you shot it. Yes, he said, Hayes, intently with rock salt. What? Was that your first time seeing one of them? He asked, avoiding my question. No, I said, shifting my position. I've seen a couple. He nodded slowly. Well, you've probably figured out by now that they're not human. I paused for a moment before answering. I had a suspicion. I've come across these things many times. It's impossible, but it's not. They're made of ice, so the rock salt. Salt melts ice, he said, sitting back in his chair. How did you know would work? That wasn't the first one I killed. I've been seeing these for months now. I felt an ache in my wrist, and something occurred to me when it grabbed me. My hand started turning blue, bright blue, almost crystalline, unlike anything that could happen to a person. Why did it? He looked down at his hands, his face falling. It was turning you to ice. It was turning you into one of them. My heart skipped a beat. How do you know? Because I've seen it happen before. I felt sick to my stomach. Does that mean that they were all human once? I believe so. I sat back, closing my eyes. Why? I whispered after a minute. He shook his head solemnly. I wish I knew the answer to that. But I don't. I just don't think this is going to end any time soon. The sunlight peeked through the blinds and fell across me. I could feel the warmth on my hand. The war. The sun. What about when spring comes and summer? I asked. If they're somehow made of ice, wouldn't they melt? He sat up, his eyebrows furrowed. How? Well, I never thought of that. I guess it's possible. For the first time since I woke up, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It'll be over soon. You have to remember, he said, suddenly snapping me out of my happy place. It's only January. If they do melt in the spring, that won't be for 2 or 3 more months. He leaned in, lowering his voice. Don't let your guard down. There's still plenty of time for them to get you. And if they turn you, you're gone. I gulped, nodding slightly. He offered to take me home, and I agreed. There was no way I was walking down the street alone. It's mid-February now, and I still don't leave the house unless absolutely necessary, and I watch carefully out the window each time my parents go somewhere. Tucked underneath my bed is a shotgun with concentrated chunks of rock salt. I've been waiting patiently for summer to come. The days have gone by agonizingly slowly, and I've grown to be somewhat of a recluse. I just can't risk it. Here is one thing, however, that keeps me up at night. What if they never melt come summer? Will I be stuck in here forever? How long will it be before they get me? How long will it be before they get us all? Story 6. Something was off about my freshman roommate. Part 1. It didn't take long for me to realize that my freshman college roommate was a very strange guy. But that wasn't all that surprising, as I'd heard about plenty of people that got saddled with weirdos as roommates their first semester of college. He wasn't strange in the sense of being a larper or never taking hours or anything like that. But from the moment I met him, something just seemed off. Move-in day was pretty odd. The first thing I remember is being surprised at how old he looked when I met him. From the roommate info card that I had received from my university over the summer, I knew that my roommate's name was Zach and he was from a town called Zionsville, a suburb of Indianapolis. I thought that he was an 18-year-old freshman like Emmy, but he looked like he was maybe 4 or 5 years older than that. Oh well, I thought it had been 2 months since I read that roommate card, so I figured I was simply mistaken and that he was just one of those guys that waited a few years before going to college. Now all that Zach brought with him to move into our dorm was a duffel bag of clothes, no furniture, no computer, no belongings, nothing. He didn't even bring bedding. I asked him if that was all that he had, and after an awkward pause he said that we was bringing the rest of his stuff later. For the next hour, I went about setting up our room. Zach sat down at the desk that came with the room and pulled an iPod out of his back pocket. So he did have at least some other things. I thought he put his headphones on, and while doing so, he would just watch me or look out the window. I tried talking to him while doing this, but his answers will be pretty short. Are your parents here with you today? No. Do you know what you want your major to be yet? No. Do you know anyone else here at defy? No. After another half hour of feebly trying to converse with him, Zach says, "That's a pretty girl. Who is she?" I was holding a framed picture of my girlfriend. What? Oh, that's Andrea. Yes, my girlfriend. She goes to you. I set the frame down on the nightstand by my bed, and that was all he said. After another 30 minutes of awkward silence, I have to get out of there, so I go to meet up with the only other guy I know from high school, my buddy Joel. I tell Joel that I think my roommate situation is going to be disaster this semester, and then we go out to grab a bite to eat. I come back to my room to find Zach is gone, but see his duffel bag still lying on the floor. I finish setting up the room and go to bed around 1 a.m. Zach still isn't back by then. I don't sleep well that first night, but figure it's due to sleeping in a new, unfamiliar place. I wake up to find Zach sleeping on his mattress with no sheets. During the day, any time Zach isn't in class, he is in our room just staring out the window with his headphones on. He nods his head if I said hello, but that's about it. I try having Joel over to our room one night, but Zach is there and it gets awkward fast because he just keeps looking out our window listening to his music the whole time we are there. After attempting to watch a movie for about 15 minutes, Joel makes an excuse to be somewhere else. Frustrated, I angrily ask Zach, "Why do you just stare out that window all the time? I just like to people watch. There's so many interesting things to see here. You're a strange dude. Zach, you need to get out more." I respond, and with that I follow Joel out. When I catch up with him, he asks me, "What's up with your roommate?" "Yeah, sorry, I tried telling you. He was a weirdo. He stares out that window all the time. He said he likes to people watch. Well, he was probably homeschooled or something. Maybe his parents were really strict and he isn't sure how to handle the wild college life," replies Joel. "Yeah, Maybe. It's just that he looks like he's 23. You would think that he's lived a little. When I go to bed again that night, CH is once again gone. I have another restless night, and when I wake, I see that he is once again sleeping on his black mattress. He must have come in quietly while I was asleep. I noticed that my computer screen is on, which was odd because I thought I had turned it off when I went to bed. Oh well, not the first time my screen turned on because a draft moved the mouse. A few more days go by and I am still not sleeping terribly well, but think it probably isn't helping that I am staying up much later than I ever did at home. Each night, Zach is gone when I go to bed late and he is asleep on his mattress when I wake up in the morning. I can't figure out where he would be since I have never seen him talk to anyone other than me. I'm pretty sure he doesn't have any friends. Thursday night of that first week, I'm doing some homework at my desk and Zach, per usual, is just staring out the window like a creep, listening to his iPod. Hey, where do you go every night? You're never here when I go to bed, and I've been up pretty late each night. He didn't respond immediately, but finally said I like to go for walks at night. I like the quiet at 2 o'clock in the morning. Yes, did you do that at home too? Did your parents just let you walk around late at night again? Long pause. I lived in a pretty small town, so it was safe. My parents didn't care. I thought you were from Zionsville. Isn't that pretty much Indianapolis? Another longer pause. Finally, Zach says, I'm going for a walk, and walks out the door. Late that night, I'm startled awake to find Zach just standing next to my bed, looking at me. Jesus, oh God, Zach, what the hell are you doing? You about gave me a heart attack. You look very peaceful when you sleep. What? I say grudgingly. What the hell are you talking about? You look very serene as you sleep. I envy that. Thoroughly creeped out, I say. I gotta take a piss. I didn't have to pee, but just wanted to get away from Zach. I go to Joel's room and tell him what just happened. It's about 3 a.m., so I'm not sure Joel is completely coherent, but he lets me crash on his couch. The next day between classes, I share with Joel again how uncomfortable Zach is starting to make me. Have you tried Googling him? Asks Joel. He's got to have Facebook page or something online. Maybe you can find something out about the creep. Yeah, I'll check it out when I get back to my computer. After another class, I returned to my room. Fortunately, Zach was at class. I typed Zach_Zionsville, and into the search bar on Google. Google finds thousands of web pages instantly, but I stare in disbelief at the top listing. Zionsville teenager Zach_stabbed to death. Culprit still missing. I click THE link and see an article from the Indy newspaper about the brutal murder of my roommate, who was repeatedly stabbed to death in his bedroom 2 weeks ago. They show Zach's senior photo. It is not the same person that I have been sharing a room with for the past week. I close the browser and sprint to Joel's room, but he has classes until 4 o'clock. Wanting to be out of our dormitory, I text him, saying to meet in the student commons after his classes. I don't want to be anywhere near my room if Zach should return in the meantime. Joel finally meets me in the stud ENT commons, and I tell him everything. I'm trying not to make a scene, but as I'm sharing the story of sleeping in the same room as a murderer for a week, I began to break down and sob. I can tell that Joel is still unsure until I pull up the news article on his phone. Then his face turns grim. He says it's probably best if we go to the police in person and tell them everything. Joel doesn't have a car on campus, so we have to go back to my room to get my keys. I'm incredibly nervous. But Joel says if we happen to see Zach, we'll just act normal and say we are going out to eat. No big deal. I peek into my room and sigh with relief as I realize that he isn't there. As I grab the keys from my desk drawer, I notice that my computer screen has 2 tabs open on it. One is my web history. The second tab is the news article about Zach's murder. Shit. I scream he was here and saw this. I glance around the room and see that his duffel bag is now gone. We gotta get to the police now. Who knows where this psycho is? As I'm running out of the room, I notice something odd. The picture of Andrea, my girlfriend, is no longer sitting on my nightstand. Story 7, the whole time. Not sure if this will scare you, but I can tell you that I was genuinely terrified, and that to this day I still have dreams about it. I started working at an old marine museum in my hometown as a summer job. It was fairly easy. All that was needed was to take entrance fees and keep the boats clean and give the occasional tour to summer camp groups. I was enamored with my town's history, and these boats were a very big part of it. The main office was located on the oldest boat there, the SS Kenora. She was 117 years old at the time, and much of the boat was still original from when she was first created. So you were literally walking and touching 117-year-old history. My manager used to poke fun at me with stories and experiences that she had had on the boats when she was working. She there, and she knew that I was a huge supernatural enthusiast, so I was very eager to hear her stories. However, what I didn't realize was that I would have my own experiences from day one. My partner that I was working with at the time was showing me how to use the old skeleton key to open up some of the doors on the Kenora. It took me a little bit to put the key in the hole, just so, but eventually I got it to work. Once we finished there, we split up so we could open up the other boats. There was a little bridge that connected the Kenora to the CGS Bradbury. As I opened up the first door to the captain's quarters, I got a very weird feeling that overwhelmed me. I felt like I shouldn't be in that room. I was determined to get the job done, so I pressed on. The feeling continued to grow as I went about my business. I was just about to step down the stairs and up onto the other side of the landing when I got a chill that racked my entire body. Every Jill hair was on end, and I frantically looked around at my surroundings. I walked back to the other side, and the feeling lessened. I pressed on and continued into the boiler room of the Bradbury. I opened up the door of the boiler room and gave a hard shove. The door groaned loudly, almost as if it were in protest. I latched it in place and stepped inside. At this point I had not turned the lights on, so it was pitch black as I was crossing over the metal graded flooring to unlock the other door from the inside. Several very loud bangs sounded from down below, and I stood there motionless for a few minutes, wondering if it was simply my own footsteps. Again 3 loud bangs sounded. This time I was perfectly still. Gaining some sort of courage, I asked if anyone was down there, although it would be impossible to get down there except through the crew quarters, which required a key. My response was met with another row of banging, the sound resonating all throughout the metal row. Ringing continuously in my ears. I grabbed my phone from my pocket and shone the light down below. All the while that overwhelming feeling of unwantedness coming back in full force. I strained my eyes to see better, but there was nothing, just thick, dark blackness. Using the adrenaline from being startled, I finished opening the rest of the boats and barreled right into the office. My partner looked up at me and smiled. That was some pretty good timing. I smiled meekly back and sat at the desk and looked out the window as clouds for a summer rain rolled in. I had regular occurrences such as those almost every day, but none as frightening as I had on my first shift alone. It was about 8:45 when I arrived at the museum. I opened up the padlock and stepped inside to put the security code into the keypad. Just as I had finished doing that, I heard a shuffling sound come from downstairs in the hold of the Kenora. My stomach clenched at his point. I hadn't even turned on a light yet, so was pitch black. I grabbed my keys again and began turning on the lights and opening up the portholes and doors. I was making my way to the back and into the galley, the kitchen, dining area, where I could hear more shuffling and dragging noses. However, these were much louder than before, and they sounded as if they were moving more quickly than when I had previously heard them. Determined not to run out of their screaming, I put my headphones in and listened to some Marilyn Manson. I flicked on all the lights on the control panel and turned around on my heel. I was just making my way up the grand staircase when I heard a very loud bang come from downstairs in the hold. Keep in mind I had my headphones in with music playing. What the hell was that? I murmured to myself quietly. Reluctantly, I went back into the galley and peeked around the corner. There was a small door to a pantry that was open. I knew for a fact that it was closed when we shut everything down the night before. I took my earbuds out and closed the pantry door. The same dragging and shuffling noise sounded from downstairs. Every part of my being was telling me to run very fast and very far away from this place. But I was curious and incredibly stupid and determined to find out who or what might have been causing the noise, so I slowly started to walk down the steps into the hold. When I had reached the bottom of the stairs, the temperature had dropped drastically. I was shivering and I could very faintly see my own breath. This was in the middle of a Canadian summer, which is normally 3-5 plus humidity, so it was definitely not cold. I turned to my right and looked down the long hall of hold. I couldn't see anyone, and the dragging sound had stopped. An eerie silence fell all throughout the hold, and I remember the atmosphere being very thick and charged. I could have cut that air with a knife. Slowly I continued to walk through the hall, and just as I was about to go into the engine room, I heard shuffling coming from a door that I hadn't ever opened before. I numbly walked over to it and placed my left hand on the padlock and turned the key with my right. To my horror, the door swung open of its own accord and violently smashed into the wall of the tiny room which I had opened. All that was in the room was a very large silver boiler, and beside it in the corner of the room was a thick black mass. It was blacker than black, and a putrid smell suddenly filled my nostrils. A sudden rush of cold air and the blur of a black mass told me that whatever this thing was not pleased with me opening up that door. I tried to cry out in fear and pain, but my own voice was silenced with spluttering coughs that racked my body. The dragging noise was replaced by loud scratching and heavy footsteps. Fearing for my life, with my face covered, I ran to the IRS and clambered my way up. I did not stop running until I was up the grand staircase and on to the second floor of the Kenora. Seriously shaken, I took a few minutes to myself in the lounge and slowed my breathing. I grimaced at the thick layers of dust on the furniture and made note to dust them later. After I had come down, I opened the rest of the boats and had a fairly busy day. At around 4:45, I had finished cash out. I began closing up. I had just finished shutting the lights off and setting the last tripwire when I got that unmistakable feeling from earlier. I got up and began taking my way to the entrance of the ship. I tried very hard to avert my eyes as I walked past a staircase to the hold, but something had caught my attention, something that should not have been there. I turned my face and gasped in sheer terror as I saw peering up at me two very bright and very menacing red eyes, and a massive figure, blacker than black, crouched on the bottomest steps of the staircase. I sent a quick prayer up to the Creator and ran to the front of the boat, heavy footsteps following after me. I punched in the code and bolted the door and quickly shut it on. I was outside. I grabbed the bar and wrenched it into place over the double doors and clicked the padlock on. The doors themselves suddenly gave a jolt as if something were trying to get through. I hopped head on my bike and rode home straight away. I slipped into a very uneasy sleep that night. The next day I had told my manager what happened, and she had said the same thing had happened to her when she was working there. She had confessed that she had many a spiritual healer and psychic come through to try and get rid of the entity, but none had been successful. I decided that I would take a walk down there the other day and just have a look at the place. I lightly brushed my hand on the hull of the Kenora and smiled. What I noticed, thick black ooze was staining its beautiful white paint. I stepped closer to see if I could determine what it was, and I swear to you I heard a very loud noise come from the inside of the hold. I placed my ear against the metal of the boat, and from the inside I could hear the same shuffling and dragging noises as before. I took my hand off the hull, stepped back and turned around, leaving the Kenora well behind me.